Escape from Cave City. The last thing Trot remembered was an ear-splitting explosion, a terrible tumble through a dark tunnel, a terrific splash and the sudden shock of finding herself underwater. Choking and spluttering, the little girl struck out valiantly. As she did, two wet arms clasped themselves round her waist and she felt herself being borne swiftly upward. Next instant the warm sun was shining on her face and, opening her eyes, Trot found herself on the surface of Lake Orosin. Supporting her with one arm, Orpah was swimming steadily toward a rocky beach. Blinking and gasping, for she had swallowed a dreadful dose of salt water, the little girl tried to look for her friends. But there was no sign of Benny or the Scarecrow, nor of the jeweled island she had seen before the Birdman dropped her in Quibberan's cave. Too exhausted to ask questions, Trot let the old merman tow her ashore. As it grew shallower, he lifted her in his arms and set her on a high rock out of the reach of the tide. "Now, I must go back for the others," he wheezed hoarsely. "But we're free, my girl, and all of our troubles are over." Trot smiled faintly, too wet and shaken to say a word, and, with a joyous flirt of his tail, Orpah disappeared under the waves. But the warm sunshine and bracing breeze soon restored Trot to herself. Wringing out her dress and shaking back her hair, she began to look eagerly for the return of Orpah. She wondered just how she had reached the bottom of the lake and whether Benny and the Scarecrow had been blown there with her. And before she had answered this question to her own satisfaction, the hard head of the stone man appeared suddenly above the water. At each step he rose higher, and Orpah, swimming joyously at his side, waved gaily to Trot. Benny was carrying the Scarecrow in his arms, and when they reached the little girl's rock, the straw man gave a feeble cheer. Benny had lost his high hat and umbrella and was covered with clinging seaweeds, but at sight of Trot, safe and sound upon the rocks, his stone lips parted in a broad smile. "Well," rasped Benny jovially, "this is better than being shades, but let's go in where it's drier." "By all means," coughed the Scarecrow. "I feel like a sponge." As Benny came opposite, Trot, standing on tiptoe, put her arms round his neck. Striding easily over the jagged rocks, the stone man carried both Trot and the Scarecrow far up on the beach. The merman had recovered his crutches by this time, and hobbled happily along behind them. "I'm glad you're not a real man yet," muttered the Scarecrow, as Benny put him carefully down on the sand. "A real man could never have walked along the bottom of a lake, nor saved us from being shadows." "Did I save you?" asked Benny, easing Trot down beside the Scarecrow. "Of course you did." Dragging himself up beside the others, Orpah beamed on the former statue. "When you refused to melt into a shadow, Osiris turned the blue ray higher and higher till it exploded and blew out the side of the cave and carried us all to the bottom of the lake." "But where are the Osier Isles?" questioned Trot, standing up and shading her eyes with one hand. "Back there," explained Orpah, waving toward the west. "That blue ray blew us clear across the bottom of the lake to the mainland." "I shall never be the same," the Scarecrow assured them sorrowfully. "I feel like an aquarium. Is my face washed off, Trot? And see what's got into my chest, will you?" Trot thrust her hand into the Scarecrow's stuffed shirt and, with a little grimace, brought forth a wriggling fish. There were several crabs and a turtle in the Scarecrow's pockets, but after they had shaken him well and restored the wiggling creatures to the lake, Trot and Orpah wrung out the poor straw man and stretched him in the sun to dry. "You'll be all right soon," smiled Trot, giving him a little hug, "and when we reach the Emerald City, you can have yourself laundered and restuffed and I'll touch up your face with my new paints." "But what are we going to do now?" asked Benny, surveying the little girl expectantly. "Well," answered Trot, shaking back her wet hair, "I think we'd better get back to the Emerald City as soon as we can, so that Ozma can help find the Queen of the Osier Isles, and keep Quibberan from doing any more mischief. Don't you think so, Orpah?" "That's the best thing I've heard since I escaped from Cave City," smiled the merman, "and if you can spare me, I'll swim across right now and tell Cheeriob the good news. Don't be too sure it will be good, sighed the Scarecrow, raising his head with a great effort. He still felt damp and depressed, but Trot shook the old mareman heartily by the hand and promised to return with Ozma to the Osier Isles. I'd like to see the Sapphire City again, finished Trot. If Trot comes, I'll come too, promised Benny, but you may not know me, for I'll be a real person after I have seen the Wizard of Oz. You're a real person now, chuckled Orpah, tapping Benny on the arm with his gold crutch, and Cheeriob will reward you well for your services. I hope they won't hang wreaths round my neck, worried Benny, as the mareman dove into the lake. I hate wreaths. When do we start on, Trot? As soon as the Scarecrow dries off and I find something to eat, answered Trot. Oh, Benny, I'm so hungry. What's that? Inquired Benny, in surprise. It's the way she's made, explained the Scarecrow patiently, and one of the inconveniences of being a real person. Real people, my dear Benny, must eat 3 times a day, at least. I'm glad I'm stuffed with straw, and you may thank your hackers and hewers that you are made of stone. But, what will she eat? Asked Benny, staring at Trot with a worried frown. Oh, I'll find something, laughed Trot, who was used to taking care of herself and picking up lunches in strange lands. Running to the top of a small sand dune, she looked carefully all around and soon found a big clump of beach plums. A toast tree grew nearby, and between the two, Trot fared extremely well. The brisk breezes dried her clothes, while she ate and, feeling rested and refreshed, Trot skipped back to her companions, thinking how astonished Dorothy and Betsy would be when she told them about Cave City and the Birdman. The Scarecrow was telling Benny something of life in the capital, and the more the public benefactor heard about this strange and marvelous city, the more anxious he was to be off. The Scarecrow himself could now walk without collapsing, so as soon as Trot appeared they both declared themselves ready to start. I know this country, declared the Scarecrow with a knowing wink. We have but to walk east until we come to Ginger's cottage, then proceed in a southwesterly direction, till we reach the Emerald City itself. Who is Ginger? Inquired Benny, tramping heavily through the tall grass. A young lady who gathered an army of girls and conquered the Emerald City when I was emperor, answered the Scarecrow, with a merry glance at Trot. How unladylike, mused the Stone Man. Are you not afraid she will conquer you again? Dear me, no, laughed the Scarecrow. That's all over and done with, and Ginger and I are the best of friends. I was tired of being emperor, anyway, he finished carelessly. It's more fun being yourself. Will I be myself when I'm a real man? Asked the statue soberly. I'm beginning to feel happy the way I am. That's because you're helping everybody, exclaimed Trot, giving him a little pat. Is it? Stroking his chin thoughtfully, the Stone Man stopped. I don't even mind losing my hat and umbrella, he finished in surprise. We'll soon find you new ones, promised the Scarecrow. As soon as we reach the Emerald City, and when we've helped find this lost queen, you can settle down with us and be happy ever afterward. How long is that? Benny eyed the straw man with deep interest. For as long as you live, announced Trot with a little skip. Then I hope I live always, sighed Benny. I'd hate to stand still for 50 years like I did before. And if I'm ever called upon to be a statue again, I hope I'll be a sitting-down statue. You have no idea how tiresome it is standing up for yourself and somebody you have never seen, year after year. The Scarecrow nodded sympathetically and, talking of this and that, but especially of the Osier Isles, the three travelers crossed several meadows and finally came to a narrow blue highway. It was so narrow they had to walk single file, but as the Scarecrow declared that any road was better than none, they proceeded along the highway until the strawman, who was in the lead, came to a full stop. "What's the matter?" demanded Trot, who came next. The Scarecrow squeezed aside so the others could see ahead and, peering anxiously over his shoulder, Trot saw a curious blue turnstile. "Shall we go on?" asked the Scarecrow uncertainly, "or shall we go back?" Standing on tiptoes, Trot tried to see where the road beyond the turnstile went to. "Let's go on," decided Trot, who could not help feeling curious. So the Scarecrow stepped through the turnstile and the others quickly followed him. Round the first bend in the road hung a big circular sign. "Roundabout Way." "Maybe the longest way round is the shortest way home," observed the Scarecrow, "and now that we are on it we may as well discover where this road goes." But it was impossible to see far. Bushy trees grew on each side of the blue pathway and it curved so that they could see only a few feet ahead. "This makes me dizzy," confessed Trot, after they had gone around dozens and dozens of curves. "Do you suppose it leads anywhere at all?" "Well, here's a roundhouse," exclaimed the Scarecrow. "Shall we go in?" Coming round the last curve, Trot and Benny saw an enormous wooden dome, larger than 10 circus tents rolled into one. There were round windows in the walls halfway up and in the side toward them a swiftly revolving door. Before the others had quite decided what to do, the Scarecrow stepped through the swinging door and disappeared. "Now we'll have to go in," decided Trot, anxiously, and, waiting her chance, she dashed after the Scarecrow and Benny stepped into the section immediately back of Trot.